So the news came out in April 2015 that Ben Hardy was going to play Angel in X-Men Apocalypse, and Newsarama posted the concept art that looked a lot like Archangel with the hilarious statement, "Singer seems intent on maintaining the timeline." Let's examine that, shall we? For the sake of simplicity, we will just focus on the core parts of the X-Men series overall. Charles Xavier, Magneto, and the basics of the X-Men. Bryan Singer's first two X-Men movies had backstory where Xavier said that he had met Eric Lensher when he was a young man and together they built Cerebro. Then they are seen in The Last Stand in flashback as much older men walking to see Jean Grey as a teenager. Walking is a key feature. Presumably, this is near the time that Charles had saved Cyclops and Emma Frost and others like Quicksilver during X-Men Origins Wolverine. Sometime after this, Charles and Eric had a lover's spat, and off Magneto goes to scheme ridiculous schemes and try to take over the world with cartoonishly hilarious failures. Then Stryker comes along to cause chaos and use Magneto to build his own Cerebro. Of course, Wolverine's backstory is teased here because he is the most ridiculously popular X-Man ever. Then Magneto is able to betray Stryker and nearly kill all the humans, and between the convenient use of mutants that will disappear soon after and Jean Grey force-pushing the ocean until just sort of giving up, I guess. But the world is saved! Then she comes back, kills off her boyfriend so he can be a bit part and Superman returns, mutants get a cure, war breaks out, and, well, it's just a bit of a train wreck from there. The now evil Jean kills Xavier, Logan is forced to mercy kill Jean, Magneto loses his powers, and all seems to be great now. I mean, look at Angel, he can fly free without being shot down by some random racist with a grudge. Aww. I mean, even Wolverine, look at him, he's standing on the lawn, he's smiling, the future is bright, everything is great, but then Wolverine stops smiling, buggers off to the woods, and basically gets over his survivor's guilt by having the best movie of the whole franchise thus far. But then Charles Xavier comes back from the dead with only powers that have no connection to the comic book as an explanation, and oh look, Magneto has his powers back and we're all BFFs again, and what? Before we end up going into this any further, let's have a look at X-Men First Class, which came out before the Wolverine. A brilliant movie that is labelled as a prequel to the original trilogy, but really cannot be at all.
When I was 17, I met a young man named Eric Lensher.
In the movie, Charles has just become a professor, which, at the time that the movie is set, the average age for a professor was 40. But let's just say for the sake of argument that Charles Xavier was some kind of wunderkind, and he was the age of the actor James McAvoy at the time, which was about 30 or 31. Michael Fassbender looks like he's around about the same age, so I suppose really this just depends on your definition of young. Also, Xavier must have left out, I met him by saving him from drowning while being dragged by a submarine in his backstory. Then there's Cerebro. Cerebro in X-Men First Class was built by Henry McCoy while working for the government. But those things could probably have been forgotten, moved around, simply lied about. One of the major things that of course end up pointing this towards reboot as opposed to prequel is the fact that Charles was being crippled while he was an air quote young man in Cuba, and Magneto taking off while they were still, again, young men and disappearing with his band of buggers. Oh yeah, and he recruits Emma Frost, who isn't a teen by the time that Xavier is old and apparently still walking, but is a full-grown woman in the 1960s. And this is where the problem starts. You can try and explain all this away if you try, but the whole point of a franchise is to be telling you the story. Subtext can be clever, Easter eggs can be fun, but if you have to watch the film and be filling in the gaping holes in plot, whether it be in the movie itself or in the series as a whole, then the writers and producers have done something wrong. And before you jump on Brett Ratner and the whole X-Men Last Stand thing, directors overall cannot be laid to blame. Even X-Men The Last Stand, as poor as it was in writing, still held continuity with the first two parts. And when it comes to the director, it is their sole purpose just to direct the film. They make a good-looking film, character direct the actors according to the script that they have been given, and try to make it all work. Brett Ratner, for instance, was a last-minute replacement on X-Men The Last Stand, and at least made the turkey look good, even if this well-cooked turkey was rotten on the inside due to lousy ingredients. Matthew Vaughn demonstrates the same, but with a much better story. However, no matter how good the movie, the plot of First Class has too many differences to the rest of the franchise, and no number of sweary cameos by Hugh Jackman will change the fact that First Class was clearly written as a franchise reboot instead of a prequel. The Wolverine, which was made afterwards, avoids all of this by basically telling a self-contained story and using a small amount of faith on fans' knowledge of the relationship with Jean Grey and her death. But even then, you can watch the movie with little knowledge of the rest of the franchise and still enjoy it. That is until the end credit scene, shot by Bryan Singer to shoehorn hype for Days of Future Past, brings that crashing down. He didn't just direct some of these films, he has input to the stories of X2, had input for The Last Stand before going off to wreck another superhero franchise, and then, oh, would you look at that, he helped make the story of First Class and Days of Future Past too. Days of Future Past cast has on-again, off-again lovers, Professor X and Magneto teaming up after supposed death and depowerment, and the ultimate abusive relationship in which eventually they will end up hurting each other again because their worldviews are polar opposites. Then Wolverine, who has his bone claws recoated with metal somewhere, is sent back in time by the cast of the original trilogy, and a few random people with no character development or dialogue, to face the event that created the Sentinels, a force so big it will wipe out all mutants and has been sat around since the 1970s with little to no notice at all until the future! In the 70s, a highly addictive substance that makes Xavier walk, but takes away his powers, is used as an excuse as to why older Xavier is seen walking since his accident, despite the fact that he can still use powers. And also that he's dead set against the cure mentioned in The Last Stand. Magneto is brought in only because only the two of them together can stop things, and that turns out just to be a daft excuse to have Magneto escape to cause further chaos. Chaos? Sean Connery. Something can cartoonishly fail because all it took was Xavier and Mystique to bond and prevent the apocalypse. So basically it all works out because of accidentally dicking with time. And oh look, Jean and Cyclops and everyone is alive again and with powers and... The only way Singer can do goodbye the franchise now is to use Apocalypse to actually reboot the franchise completely, even though he's accidentally rebooted it and then said he didn't. And the reason for this is because he is the unreliable narrator of a franchise he supposedly loves. Singer has story credit, he and the producers could at least try to make some sort of consistency, but instead have their fingers in their ears and singing a song la 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 and trip, stumble and faceplant into another big budget effects-laden mess, and then hand out this watery ejaculate telling the masses it's ice cream, and we will all lap it up because we get to see our heroes on film. Very poorly handled film. You're welcome for the mental imagery, by the way. I am the best there is at what I do. And what I do is, well, sometimes funny. If you like that sort of thing.